Hello, Ryan Koral. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Wes, thanks for having me, man. This is super fun. It's fun to be on the other side of the mic. Is it how you say that?
Yeah, you're, I guess, the other side of the camera, other side of the mic. I know I've really enjoyed, learning from you through Studio Sherpas, and you brought a lot of content online that has had a lot of value, and it's just great to be able to interview you on the podcast. So, but for listeners who might not be familiar with what you do, can you tell us just a little bit about your journey? I know you started off in video production, but what has that journey been like?
Yeah, it's been 16 years long, and I worked at a small Christian college for a couple of years and somehow convinced them to buy a video camera and a computer for me to start making videos. And shortly thereafter, I was like, how do I do this like all the time? Because I just loved the process. I loved making stuff. I love video, and I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. And so got into doing video and really went full-fledged into wedding films and creating these like beautiful art pieces for families. Really, for us, we thought that they would become treasures in these legacy pieces. And so we did that for a bunch of years and got to travel all over and film celebrities and do all sorts of crazy stuff. Be in situations where I'm like, I do not belong here. This is crazy. Can't believe these people are actually paying me to be here. And then I get to eat their yummy food at dinner time tonight. So we did that for a long time. And then as the business grew and I was hiring more employees and we had bigger dreams and aspirations, we started working with businesses and creating films for businesses and nonprofits and telling their stories and creating marketing content for them. And just I have learned so much. My role has changed throughout the years. Today I'm more a boss than a filmmaker. I don't edit like any of the projects that we're doing for clients. I don't touch that stuff. I might go on set, but my main responsibilities really are business development and strategy. And I think from the very beginning, those are the things that have been inside of me that I was able to use as I started a video company. But I was probably destined to start a business somehow, some way, just because it was inside of me. Yeah. And so about 4 years ago, I've also, because I love strategy. And most creatives are afraid of business and strategy. Like those things just don't compute.
They're kind of
they
two
just
different things in some ways.
Yep, and they just want to do their craft, right? They're amazing at shooting and editing and telling stories, but when it comes time to charge what you're worth and scale your business and grow and just do the things that a business needs to do, be profitable, most creatives are just like, they shy away from that. But I wanted to enter into that. And so I would have so many conversations because I love people and I love, kind of hearing where people are at in their journey. And as I would talk to people, I would say like, oh, you should be trying this. And like, have you tried this software? Or like, how are you, being efficient as you're exporting, just all these things that were business-minded type questions. And I would have all these people that were just like, not blown away at the things that I was saying, but like things that they never really thought. And I was like, how do you not think of that? Like, it just seems like
it's natural to you.
Common sense, right? So I learned early on that I had a knack for business where most people didn't in my industry, and I wanted to help people. And so I would speak at different conferences and events and stuff. And then I was hosting a monthly meeting for people in the Michigan area, filmmakers in the Michigan area. And it was about 4.5 years ago that my friend Matt Davis and I were we were filming a wedding, one of his clients down in, I don't know, Kentucky or something. I think it was Kentucky. And he said, hey, I'm thinking about getting back into coaching and consulting for video people. And I said, could I like do that with you? And he's like, are you serious? And I was like, are you serious? And so he just got really excited, and we just thought we could help video business owners grow their business, focus on the things, not help with shooting and editing, but really say like, these are the things that you need to do to grow a business. This is what has worked for us, and this is what has not worked for us. Doing this for a long time, there have been plenty of things that have worked and lots of things that haven't. So we started Studio Sherpas about 4 years ago, and it's been super fun. We started the podcast pretty early on, and I love having both businesses because in one, I'm getting to grow it, and in the other one, I really feel like I'm investing in other filmmakers, in their business, in their lives, and the legacies that they're trying to create.
And so backing up a little bit, I know you started with Matt. You were talking with him about creating the business. What kind of alignment do you think there had to be in order for you guys to be able to come together? Was it just the initial spark and then things kind of took off? Or was it, did that idea percolate over the course of several months?
Yeah, well, what's funny is when he started coaching, him and I became fast friends. We met at a conference in like probably, I don't even know, 2007, 2008. something like that. And we both had our wives with us at this conference. And so the four of us, we went out to dinner. We're just hanging out. And I was like, man, this guy, I love the challenges that he's having in his business are things that I've overcome. And the challenges that I'm having are things that he's overcome. And so we're just like back and forth. And so we really hit it off. And it was probably a year or two after that where he started speaking at conferences. And I was like, I want to do that. And so then I'm speaking, and then he started like a separate brand where he's coaching. He was known as the video business coach, or actually, I don't remember what it was called. But he started doing that, and I was like, oh, dude, I want to do that. And I was so jealous. Like I was mad at myself that I didn't, come up with the idea sooner and start doing it. And so I just, out of respect, or what I thought was, it was respect. Out of respect, I said, well, let's let him do that. And the whole time I'll wish that I was doing that too. In hindsight, realizing that, no, I could have launched my own thing and that would have been fine. We would have maybe competed over some business, but at the end of the day, we're just trying to help people. And so whoever connects with us best would be the best fit. So anyway, that was a desire of mine as soon as I saw him doing it, and he took some time off after doing it for a couple of years, and then when he was ready to do it again, I was like, let's do it. So we chatted with a lawyer and just said, like, what would it look like for us to start this thing together, and we came up with an operating agreement and an exit agreement if things came to that, and we were very clear on the expectations and what we wanted to get out of this thing, and so I think we were both just super fired up about it. And I had asked my wife, I said, hey, are you okay with me starting another business? Because you remember, like, a little over a decade ago, I started a business. It was pretty hard for a couple of years or a few years. Are you okay with, us kind of going through that again? And she was like, if this is really what you want to do, then let's do it. And hopefully there's an end in sight of when things might, calm down a little bit.
No, that's interesting. So for both of you, was it easier for you to leverage your in-person experience in terms of whether it's coaching, speaking, live versus like what came first, the digital content that's out there or the in-person training that both Matt and you had started to do?
I think like kind of right from the period of launch, we had a website. We put up a website, and then he had an email list, and we were a part of a couple of different Facebook groups, and we just said, hey, we're a thing. This is a thing. If you want training and education on how to grow your video business, then go to studiosherpas.com. We have a free webinar that we're going to be teaching how to start or grow a corporate filmmaking business, and that was it. Like, we launched with this webinar, and after a week or two of the doors being open of Studio Sherpas, we did this free webinar, and then we sold $1,000 training for people that were interested in creating a corporate filmmaking brand. And we were like, oh my gosh, we sold like 10 seats, and we're like, okay, so people actually want this. This is really crazy and cool. And so that was the beginning of the content. It was like we made something that people wanted, and then it was just more about figuring out, well, what else? What other problems or struggles do they have, and what other stuff can we make that will help them? And shortly thereafter was when the podcast idea was born. I've always, back my first year in college, I joined up with the radio team or whatever they were at the university, and so I got behind a microphone, and I'm like, oh man, I love hearing my voice in these headphones. As dumb as that sounds, but it's just weird. I've always liked being behind the mic. I've always liked talking and teaching and helping and making people laugh, and just that feeling of like, people hopefully listening and knowing and believing
it's good to
that
like
I have
your voice too, because if you don't like your own voice, then
that's right.
It's a painful job.
Exactly. But really feeling like, I have something to offer. I think that's where I've believed that for a long time. Not all my life, but probably for a majority of my life, where I felt like I could add value to people's lives. So doing the podcast for me has been such a blast. And I think we released like episode 167 or something this week, and it's just crazy to think that, wow, that's a lot of weeks there of podcasting.
It is, yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, it's been super, super fun.
Okay, so then going back, you mentioned that the Matt had an email list that he had been cultivating. Was that from his previous coaching business? Yep,
exactly.
And had he built that through kind of like personalized contacts, or had he built it through some sort of lead magnet that he kind of brought people in under?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. He was speaking at different events, and he had some free content that you could sign up for, on his website, and he sold a lot of like really affordable like templates that people could purchase. And so I think that it's a long time ago. It's almost 5 years ago. I think he had a list of 4,000 or 5,000 people. Maybe it was 2,000. I don't remember, but it was in the thousands.
It was in the thousands, so it was actually pretty significant.
Yeah, it
in
was
terms
definitely
of
significant.
building that up, and I'm sure he had kind of worked on that, probably over the course of several years, kind of creating some of that content.
Yeah, 2 or 3 years. He went pretty hard at that business,
at the coaching business.
Yeah.
Okay, so to a certain extent, it was just really helpful being able to start the process of cultivating, creating content before even going big, to be able to have some sort of base following.
Yeah, because otherwise,
kind of launching thin air. Just you can't.
Yeah.
You have to create a ton of content in order for people to find you just organically.
Right. With YouTube, if you have a niche, 10 years ago, if you were trying to teach people how to become a wedding filmmaker, that was not as prevalent as it is today. So you create 3, 4, 5 videos on that topic, and you were
like the expert.
Get subscribed
10 years
to,
ago,
right? It's a little bit different today, but speaking at events and encouraging people to go sign up for your free lead magnet on your website is probably one of the quickest, easiest ways for people to know, like, and trust you and want to trade you for that, so that you can build your list that way.
Okay. No, it does seem that has become just a very recent, especially now with things potentially changing when it comes to the ability to do like trackers or stuff like that online, that a lead magnet where you present something of value that is people can download, give you their email address, seems like one of the best ways to be able to grow any kind of coaching business where you're offering some sort of training.
Yes.
I think StoryBrand, they've kind of grown a lot of their stuff. I'm a big fan of their content, and I know they grew that way as well. But then going back to how much work did you actually have to put into kind of creating some of those lead magnets on your end, and what was that rhythm like? I know kind of a big fan of rhythms. Was it, hey, Matt and I, we're gonna just hash out over the course of several weeks, sit together, work on things while simultaneously running our business? Did you get together for, kind of a retreat and powwow, or what was that process like?
Yeah, we did a couple of those. We did a couple of retreats. It's so hard because, having another business and having employees having employees in that business, and having certain sales markers that need to be hit, and revenue and all that. It's like a real thing. So we're starting this other business that made some money at the very beginning, but we were just like, well, we're going to put that right back into the business.
Yep.
We're not going to use that for anything. We've got branding and all this other stuff that we really want to spend some money on. So, what was the question?
Yeah. So I was just curious to know, what that process was like for.
Oh yeah.
Especially because when you're a business owner, you have your smartphones these days that just, they are killing, deep thought, like deep work, and the ability to focus in. And I know planning isn't something you can always do in, hey, a 30-minute increment or an hour increment. It does take a certain level of focus and dedication to get something done, besides just responding to emails and quick thoughts. And so I was just curious, like, was it that, hey, let's get away and hash out these plans, or back and forth through emails to actually create some of that initial content to get things off the ground?
Yeah, my advice today is to definitely peel away from the day-to-day, and to get at least a day with no distractions. Content bucket strategy. This is something that I borrowed from my friend Graham Cochrane, who does like an overnight thing at the end of every year, and he just thinks through what are the different buckets and the type of content that my people are hungry for, and then just filling in those buckets with different ideas. Just a thought, a sentence, and kind of creating enough content for the quarter or maybe even the year. Because really what, he does 4 different buckets, and he's like, if I can get 12 ideas for each bucket, then that's almost an entire year's worth of content. And then, if he's doing he's got 4 buckets, 12.
Oh, I see what you're
That's
saying.
like
Yep.
48. Yeah, so about 48 ideas. So then, he can kind of pick and choose what his audience wants. If you have an audience, being able to ask your audience, like, what are some of the things? What are some of the pain points? What are some of the struggles? And then creating content based off of that. So the rhythm that we got into early was, we had this webinar. We asked a lot of questions about like struggles and that sort of things. But then launching the podcast, we would base, some of the episodes off of the things that people that had questions about, but then bringing on guests and having them share like, well, what things are working for you? What's not working for you? How did you get success? And what's your recommendation? And so that kind of content would give us other ideas for content. And then people would, engage with those pieces of content. So having that weekly rhythm of knowing that we're going to interview somebody, probably in most cases, or sometimes we would do solo episodes. Sticking to that was probably a really good habit for us to know and believe that we have to be creating content, but then above and beyond the podcast, it's kind of like, well, what are some of the other free lead magnet downloadable things that people can get, learn from, see the value in the way that we teach, figure out if they like my style or not, and then figure out if they want to go deeper, where we offer paid courses and digital content that they can actually give us dollars for.
So was a big part of that was really being able to actually take some bigger planning sessions and actually think through spots for those, what's going to go in the buckets is. So it's not just a matter of, oh, this week, what am I going to do? And I don't have anything, or let's spit something out, but it's actually deep focus, planning that out strategically. So that way, when it comes to content creation, you're not thinking through the planning stage. It's just execute.
Yeah. Well, if here's where we can fall into a trap and think like, well, I'm going to get away and just start thinking about ideas of things that I want to create. That's probably a mistake, because if you're creating inside of a vacuum, it's not going to relate to your audience. We did a really good job of surveying people early on and asking a bunch of different questions about their business and their goals and their dreams, those kinds of things. And then to create content based off of that, like, I mean, we wouldn't have had to have a retreat where we said, okay, like, let's come up with a bunch of ideas. We had a bunch of ideas that people gave us. And so for us to, create content based off of that was probably, that has been, for my actual video production business and the Studio Sherpas brand, and then other people that I consult with that are content creators and creating courses and whatnot. That's just the smartest thing to do, is to actually ask your social media following that is specific to your niche, and email and that whole thing of like, what can I help? Like, what would serve your business well? What would be the one thing, if you could wave a wand and everything could be different today, what would that look like? What would be different? And building content based off of that stuff.
Oh, and so you're doing that really. It's not so much, hey, you brainstorming things in your own mind of what you think is going to work, but actually, reach out to people beforehand and do that. So when you were first starting and before you had a following, was it, hey, let's reach out to Matt's audience, let's meet the people he knows or the people we've talked to, and then gradually do iterations as you actually create a following and customers or people specifically for Studio Sherpas?
Yeah, that's totally like, I think we did an email question, and then we were on the forums asking similar questions, and then we created a formal like survey, link, and would push people there. So we had a lot of different areas where we could go and actually see like, what are the questions that people have, and do we know the answers, or can we find out the answers to help them?
Okay. And then too, I know with running both businesses like Tell Studios, Studio Sherpas, to what extent were these, completely different audiences? Was there some overlap, or really have they been completely different, with, Studio Sherpas being the, business owners, video producers, Tell Studios being, owners who want you to produce content for them?
Yeah, there was zero overlap when we first started. It's funny today, though, 4 years later, our Tell Studios email list is probably 70% filmmakers and video producers because they're just curious to know how we're creating content. They're curious to know like what kind of emails do we send our people. They're curious to see what these downloads are that we're offering our people, which, that's fine. It just messes up our Facebook ad strategy when we're creating lookalike audiences or remarketing to those people, and their filmmakers like, we're never going to hire you to do a video for us. We just want your ideas so we can help our clients with those. So there's overlap today only in the fact that those people end up on our list, but when as Tell Studios, we're not speaking to the video producer, the video business owner. As Studio Sherpas, we're only speaking to the video business owner.
And
that makes sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then that was a pretty clear distinction early on, you'd say, in terms of, this is a very different audience.
Yeah, it was really helpful to be clear in that. Now, I will say that I do have some friends from the Tell Studios world, people that have hired us to create videos for them, that have found it interesting, the Studio Sherpas podcast, because a lot of what we talk about is marketing and strategy and in those types of things that sometimes can apply. I think a lot of times can apply to any business. So there's been a little bit of crossover there, but more just out of, I would say, entertainment value, because they're like, oh, we know this guy and he's got a podcast, and
we'll check him out.
Yeah. So.
Okay. And so for you, I'm curious, with doing the podcast, to what extent did that become kind of a creative outlet? I know you said it had been going back to your desire to be on radio, but was the podcast really that first bit where you were producing content like just for you that you enjoyed, like featuring you? Because I know there's always that balance between, all right, produce stuff for other people and I want to produce something for me. What was that process like?
Well, I know because Studio Sherpas was born with this idea to help other video businesses grow their business. One way to do that is to talk to other business owners and other experts. And so for me, selfishly, I knew that I was going to learn a lot from the people that I was asking to be on the show. I feel like I don't tell anybody this, but I feel like I get an opportunity to like sit at the feet of people who I deeply respect and, maybe follow from afar online or whatever, but have learned from, super appreciate in the fact that I get to spend an hour with them on a podcast. I learned so much. I take notes. So I know that if I'm learning and it's helping my business, that it's just like it translates to all these other people that are doing the same thing that I'm doing. And so for me, it's like a win-win. Like I'm getting direct, contact with these people.
With people.
And it just makes me feel good. I love it. I love spending time with people. I love learning. I love asking, questions and seeing what people have to say. And then I know that content, also serves somebody more than just myself. So if it was just serving me, I probably wouldn't do a podcast. Just see if you want to have a conversation with me. But it's also, having a podcast is weird because I've had conversation with people, again, that I definitely should not have had a conversation with. But because you have a podcast, people are like, yeah, sure, I'll have a talk or, an hour-long talk with you. It's like, where in the world does this make sense? Well, I guess it makes sense here in this space.
Yeah, and I think people always like the fact that it's like going to live on. And so they're either curious because like, hey, I like the idea of being a podcast or something, a deliverable. It's more exposure for them. Yeah. They don't have to worry as much about, I had coffee with, I think we've all probably had times where we've had coffee with someone and then afterwards you're like, oh, that was kind of a waste. Waste of my time. I'm sure they, at one point I drove like an hour to meet with somebody. Ooh. I thought he was like a prospective client, and then I show up and then he really was just a guy just out of college who wanted advice. And I was like, oh, I clearly didn't read my email. Like I should have, and I drove. It wasn't like I just like did a Zoom call. It was like I drove. I was like, and he basically like wanted my advice, and I was like, oh, that was cool, but like I could at least made him come to my office, Right. I wasted my whole afternoon giving this guy advice, so this isn't gonna work.
That's amazing.
But when you're right, when you're recording it, putting it out there, I think it is a win-win for both people.
And there's no drive time.
Yeah, and there's no drive. And I think especially, with coronavirus, I think these things are more important. I mean, we're looking at a conference and going to one, and there's that debate. Like, all right, is it going to be closed? Is it going to be canceled? Am I going to get coronavirus? But here I'm in a little bubble, and we're both safe, and we can interact and don't have to worry about catching anything.
I'm gonna cough into my microphone here, see if it's transmittable through.
Yeah. Sure, hope not. But
the Wi-Fi's. Yeah.
No, and then so when it came to the podcasting guests, I've heard a few different theories where it's like, hey, you have to really reach out to people. What was that process for you of building those relationships, getting people to be on your podcast? Was it kind of a snowball, or was it just a lot of work building relationships? Reaching out. What was that like?
I would say it hasn't been a lot of work building relationships. I think that
because you do that pretty naturally.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like a natural extension. Again, one of those things that I can do with my eyes closed. There are a couple of superpowers that I have, and that's one of them, where I just like people, and I like to, whatever. But early on, I was just asking my friends and maybe second degree connections, but mostly first degree. And I know a lot of people. So, the first 20 episodes are probably mostly wedding filmmakers. And as soon as we got a little bit of momentum, I would ask there were a couple of bigger names that I would have on the show. And then I would reach out to people and say like, oh, we've, featured this person on the podcast, a name that they might recognize. And then when we hit 100,000 downloads, or we hit our 100th episode, like these were things in an email that I would craft. We have this template email that goes out to people that we want on the show. And we've rarely been turned down. There have been probably 4 or 5 out of like hundreds. I guess we haven't had 200 episodes, but over 100 people we've reached out to. I don't even know, 5, 10 that where I've just been like, oh man, I knew it was a shot in the dark.
Yeah.
And those are the people that they might be able to do a 15 or 20 minute podcast.
But the 50-minute is just a little too much.
Yeah, it's too much. And I don't have a link on my Calendly to say like, oh, I would take a 15-minute interview. That would be great and awesome and super fun for me. Again, if I go to a conference and if it's somebody I really want to meet afterward, I'll wait in line and you get 90 seconds with that person, and all I do is like say like how much I appreciate them and thank them, and and then they're like, oh, that's great, and get a picture, and that's it. 15 minutes. If I could get 15 minutes with that person, that would be amazing. So maybe I need to rethink some of those tougher to get people, and or just have a secondary email that goes to them when they refuse, and just say like 15-minute slot you could do here. That's a good idea. Thanks, Wes. Appreciate that.
Oh, okay, yeah, no.
I'm gonna write that one down.
And had you primarily been relying on email for reaching out to people, or had you? I know I talked to Ben Amos, and he had done a lot of like DMs.
Ben, love that guy.
Yeah, no, Ben's been so helpful. Is someone who I know you kind of put me in contact with him through your like just list of resources and everything. And I know he kind of encourages people to just do like direct message through video to people. Have you gone in that way, or just mainly done email?
Actually, I have delegated that task. I've given it to Tina, our virtual assistant, and she just sends an email out. I know that we're doing more and more video emails to people, introductions when things go awry, when we need to explain things. An email is great when I need to get in front of a potential client again. Waving at them and just saying, hey, in case you forgot about me, I'd love to touch base again. But I could definitely see if we were getting a lot more no's, I would say like, hey, maybe we need to rethink this strategy. But up till now, I'm still surprised at all these different authors and like big name people that agree to be on the show, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe they believed our email. And it's written fine. It's not like super amazing copy or anything. We're just kind of like, we think that you would be a great voice to our tribe. We have this many downloads. We've had big names like XYZ, and would love for you to consider being on the show. And like I said, probably 90% of the people are like, yeah, let's do it.
Oh, sure. All right. No. Yeah. Cause I've, recently, especially now that I've been doing the podcast, I have been talking to a lot of people, and, there's definitely is a lot, you get some mixture where people are like, oh, do you think there's too many podcasts out there? And, and then I was like, well, and the person I was talking to was like, was writing a book about eloping actually. And I was like, well, is there a podcast about eloping? You're already interviewing people for your book. Like you could just turn that into a podcast. And she was sort of like, oh, that's kind of interesting idea. And, I'm sure it's sort of like saying, and ask, well, are there too many videos on YouTube yet? And then it's like, no one really says there's too many videos on YouTube.
Right.
But there's just so much more space, and I think it's one of those areas where, yeah, as more conferences go digital, it's just as easy as being, on a computer, Zoom call, $15 plug-in, to start off a month with Zoom, and then, eventually you get, you can get mics and grow and stuff like that. But it's not based on whether it's going to succeed or not. And so I think that's encouraging for more people too, who are wanting to create their own content. There's a lot of people who are in that business owners, and then they want to expand, and they're not sure exactly like what do they do. And I think digital literacy, not just so before we had like reading and writing, and I think kind of moving into this, this next era, it's how digitally literate are you? Can you actually like film something and like record audio? And it's like that, almost a requirement almost, I think, really moving into this next decade.
Yeah.
And so, for you, I'm curious, you were a video producer, you started doing the podcast, but then you almost brought video back into it for an element later. What was that process like of bringing video back into your, ironically, a podcast, and how was that a decision?
Yeah, well, most of the podcasts we were doing were video anyway, because for me, I'm like very personable and I want to like see the people that I'm talking to, and just thought that it would make a better impression if they could see my goofy face and I theirs. Not their goofy face, just my goofy face. And so it was like, well, we're already recording this. How much more work would it be to edit the video and post the video so that the content for people that like to watch stuff, and then the possibility of creating shorter videos edits from the podcast that could be used for our social platforms. And so it was just a no-brainer. It wasn't like that much more of a cost to do that, and that's been good.
Okay, no, it seemed to work pretty well. Then going back a little bit, so I know you started off working with Matt and yourself, and kind of things were plugging along. To what extent did you find that Tell Studios was kind of supporting your coaching business? Because I think there's a lot of people who are in that creator space who enjoy the coaching, but it's finding that balance between, I need to keep my main ship alive, that's like paying for everything, yet still doing coaching. What has that journey been of balancing those two?
That's been probably the hardest part. The year that we launched was one of the worst years financially for my main business, because I created another business, and without having a solid sales funnel and repeatable marketing tactics that we could use to help grow our audience, and just things that a smart business owner would have done before starting another venture. Having those things in place would have been great, but it's been just a balancing act, and I would say I'm not that great at it. Fortunately, within Tell Studios, I have an amazing team. I've got an operations manager. So that position, that really, I became the bottleneck in a lot of different things because I was doing a lot of the operating as well. And once I started delegating that, I found a lot of freedom to be able to spend more time inside of Studio Sherpas and not feel guilty, not feel like I was saying no to things that I should be saying yes to inside of Tell Studios. So my position and my role inside of Tell Studios has really morphed over the last few years, and it's a lot more healthy of a balance. And but it's constantly one of those things. I think now today I probably spend 75% of my time on Tell Studios and about 25% on Studio Sherpas, and that's a pretty good balance. I would love to see them more equal, but that's going to require probably some type of salesperson. John does some sales with us, but I probably need somebody in a more active role than myself if I was to equal those out a little bit more. But it's hard. It's definitely really, really challenging, and I think kind of knowing what some of my goals are in each business has helped clarify, like, well, what is the expectation on me? Like, what do I need to do inside of each business to not like what's the least thing needed, but in some sense, like what is definitely required in either, and then what goals do I have so I know how to spend my time more efficiently in both business.
Oh, and what would you say has become kind of like your queen bee activity, or that thing that you have to do in each one that brings the most value in, let's say, Tell Studios? I guess go back to that first.
Yeah, Tell Studios. I mean, right now it's going to events, conferences, workshops, places where I can meet people, networking, type stuff. That is the best ROI on my time inside of Tell Studios, and then content creation. Like this year is the first year that we said, hey, let's create weekly content, not a podcast. We've done a couple of different podcasts, and I think they both had potential to do some of the things that we wanted to, but they weren't defined enough, and they kind of just were all over the place, and so it didn't work how we wanted them to. So this year we really just started creating more video content that we could use on LinkedIn. So we've tried Facebook for the longest time. Used to work for us in our early days when we were just working with wedding clients in that industry, and now that we work primarily with businesses, Facebook just we didn't get traction on it.
You have to pay a lot more to play now.
You've got to pay something, but early on you didn't have to pay anything. You just create blog posts, share the blog posts on Facebook, and you'd become viral. Oh, not really viral, but so
you at least gain traction. Yeah,
exactly. So this year we just said, like, let's create a strategy for LinkedIn. We hired somebody to help us with creating a strategy and giving us direction, and so we're doing that. And I mean, so far we're getting some traction. Like we're actually, and the stuff that we're creating isn't, created a couple of prank videos, but also some teaching videos. I
actually saw one of those. Yeah,
the old air horn, can't go wrong. So that's been really good to commit to creating, one video a week, at least one video a week. And not just sharing the work that we're doing, but kind of getting into the why and the how of what we do that I think is interesting for people. And I'm passionate about the teaching things. When I'm in a sales conversation with somebody talking about the value of video and the different stages of the funnel and the different kinds of videos that you need, when somebody first comes to your website versus when they're looking at a competitor versus you, what kind of video they should be seeing at that point. So I love kind of talking through our clients and educating them so that they're making smart decisions when it comes time to do a video, whether that's with us or with somebody else.
No, and so since you brought up the stages, would you mind, for listeners who are thinking about, creating more of the content for themselves, how do you break those, how do you personally break those categories down from obviously like initial brand awareness, I'm sure, to light? What do you use specific terminology?
No, I mean we do, like, very top of the funnel is awareness. It's like something that's going to grab somebody's attention. Somebody's going to maybe pull at their heartstrings. Just something that is going to not get into the nuts and the bolts and talk about all the features of what you offer and the things that make you different. That's kind of like at
later
the bottom, right? It's like. That comes next. If you can't connect with them on an emotional level, then all you're going to be doing is competing on price when you're talking about your features and your benefits. And so that's really the how we explain it. It's like, are you at that spot where people might be looking at other people, and so you need to talk about the actual things that they might get and why they would choose you, why they should trust you, or do you just need to grab their attention and introduce yourself to the world? If so, like, we need to create something that's a little more engaging, a little more emotional, maybe not the CEO talking about why people should hire.
About how awesome they are. Yeah,
right,
I can't tell you how many times I've seen that where people's like,
we
need the CEO talking about how awesome they are. It's like, tune out now.
Yep, done.
No, okay. So it was definitely very much a balancing act between kind of keeping those two of them, and when it comes to like percentage of revenue and time, do you have any estimates? Obviously you don't need to know like numbers, but do you have any estimates, like, as a percentage of revenue, Studio Sherpas versus Tell Studios? Is it still Tell Studios that kind of keeps everything afloat, or is it, eventually do you see yourself being able to transition over completely to Studio Sherpas, or just always keep that Tell Studios in the background as your main cash cow, or however you call it?
Yeah, I mean, they're completely separate businesses.
Okay, so they're completely separate.
Yeah, Studio Sherpas is, I'm the sole owner of both businesses. I don't have any employees inside of Studio Sherpas. I have contractors that we'll use, and occasionally I'll have my Tel Studios team work on some video stuff and just help in different areas with Studio Sherpas. But that business runs on its own, as does Tel Studios, with the help of all of my employees. So, if I was to focus just on Studio Sherpas, that would be a very profitable business for me, and I could make a very good living doing just that. It would be super fun. It brings me a lot of life doing that. At the pace that I do it now, it's harder. It would be harder to make a living off of that. So, one of my goals, I would love to take a lesser paycheck from Tel Studios and take a greater. Well, I guess I'm the only one that really takes a paycheck from Studio Sherpas, but I would be able to. I would love to be able to continue to add more benefits and more money and stuff to my team inside of Tel Studios, and not have to require myself to take a paycheck from that business. I think that would be really cool. That's
get the systems up and running. Get the systems up and running with Tel Studios to the point where you can kind of remove that. No, because I do think there is a little bit of a challenge between. Whether I've seen times like photographers or people who run the business but enjoy the coaching, and they are at times like, oh, I'd love to jump over more to the coaching, but what that looks like exactly is always like a little bit nebulous, and so you kind of do it on the side but still keep your main thing going. That is kind of what you like be able to produce to run a company.
Just to speak into that, like the hardest part for me, I don't really see doing just one of these things. I do Studio Sherpas because inside of Tel Studios, I am educating my clients, but I love the impact that I have on these studio owners to help them inside of their business. And to just do one, as I do Tel Studios, I'm teaching people what's working. How we're getting clients, how we're able to. So as soon as I step away from that and just focus on coaching people, then I'm losing touch of like, well, what's working today? Because things are constantly changing. There are some things, some truths that remain, and I think at the core of what I'm trying to teach are some of those things. But then there are plenty of things like, hey, this year this is trendy, and you should look at this because I think you could make some money doing this. Or you just need to be aware that Facebook doesn't work. I'm just making this up right now. Facebook doesn't work to market your business anymore. This year you need to look at using LinkedIn. So for me, I just see them working together, and gives me a lot more leverage and a lot more
like credibility and
credibility and all that stuff that I just wouldn't want to step away from the actual work and start telling people like, well, you need to do this, because then people are going to say like, well, but you were in business 10 years ago and you're not anymore. I don't care what people have to say, like stuff like that, but I do want to bring the most value I can, and I think in the way to do that is to have a business where we actually are doing that. We're testing the things that I'm bringing to the Studio Sherpas community and saying like, hey, we just started doing this, or we just stopped doing this because it's not working anymore. So consider maybe it's not working for you as well.
Yeah, and so I think that also brings it up to an interesting point when it comes to like education and studying some of these things. I did undergraduate work. I've kind of held off on doing a master's because in some ways I'm like, well, I'm not going to find a professor in this space who can stay relevant, because as soon as they like step out and go into the like academic world and stop doing it, like they almost become out of date when it comes to, especially in the video marketing space. Right. But one of my goals has been to continually be learning from industry experts like yourself, who are doing things and actually like putting out helpful content out there. So so going back to the journey with Matt and you, I know. So you're still a co-founder, but I know you're mainly the only one leading Studio Sherpas. But it was a good thing. I know you said that when you drafted things, you planned. What was the exit strategy like? You didn't go into it blindly, and so what was that like for him, having to go back to like leaving Studio Sherpas and going back to the main business?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like. We had a honeymoon phase for a long time where we both were like, this is amazing. But then at the end of the day, it was a business. And, in order for a business to work, it's like you got to spend time in it. And and then knowing that you have another business where you literally have to spend time in that business. So as my business suffered that first year, I don't know numbers or anything like that. I know Matt had similar struggles. Fortunately for me, I had a different structure of my team and I delegated different responsibilities so we could take a hit and that would be okay for a little while. And so I just know that, after 2 years of doing that work together, it just became apparent that it just wasn't working anymore. It was hard. It was hard for both of us, but Matt just said, hey, I really need to focus on my core business, the thing that is my livelihood and that, is my employees' livelihood, as much as I like doing and being a part of the Studio Sherpa stuff and educating and training. Maybe I'll come back to that at some point, but I really just need to get back to focusing on my bread and butter. And so, it was, it's a sort of awkward conversation to say like, well, okay, so like, what does that mean? And what does that look like? And, fortunately we had a rule book or a playbook that said like, well, here's how it can happen, and super amicable. We did a podcast shortly after he had left, I think, and just kind of talked about our journey together through that. And, the biggest thing for us was maintaining friendship. And I think it would have been harder to maintain friendship without a very clear expectation of how to break up, if you will. So super important to have had that document drafted. And then, him and I are both just committed to, number one, friendship and working through stuff. And, we had other things throughout the couple of years that we were doing this together that we had to work through. And this was just like one more thing of like, well, hey, how do we, exit beautifully and respectfully and all that stuff. And it's cool today, we're still buds and talk and text and
maybe we need to have him back in 2 years after.
Yeah. And I'm excited for him. He's got a lot of great stuff going. And I think that's a good idea. It's time to get him back on an episode.
Yeah, get him back on. No, that's great. So I know you mentioned, you're always learning. And so what are ways that people can learn from you, in terms of obviously Studio Sherpas, but, do you have any, flagship courses you're pushing right now, or, what do you find is working right now? What's the hot topic with Studio Sherpas?
Oh man. Always learning, always growing. Just a total aside, I'm a huge Audible fan, as you know. I recommend books all the time. I'm just finishing a book called Just Mercy, which was a movie that was released last year. I haven't seen the movie, but about injustice and just crazy racial inequality, and it's the saddest thing. Finishing that book, amazing story, and
let's check that one out.
It's different from, most of the books I'm listening to are,
business and
spiritual and whatever. And, but I know that sometimes I need to get out of that space. And so this was a great break, as sad as some of these stories are. So anyway, Studio Sherpa stuff. Man, we've got, I have so many things planned for this year. I've closed down a couple of things that we have been offering, a couple of courses and things. I would say best thing right now for people to do is to attend. I have a workshop that people can go to, which is found at studiosherpas.com/workshop. And really, one of the biggest struggles that we have is finding repeatable, profitable clients, and the workshop is designed around helping people create a process. Process does not sound sexy at all, but money in the bank and less stress of like wondering where my next job is going to come from, that is more appealing. So that's really the heartbeat of what I'm trying to teach people. So people can go there, sign up for the free workshop, and see what that's all about. But even before that, podcast, there's 167 episodes or so that have amazing guests, amazing topics, and those can be found at
I'll add the show notes too, so I'll have the links there.
Yeah, Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever
wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah.
No, perfect. Well, I'll make sure I have those links on in the show notes, and as well as that book. And any other last recommendations or resources that you would currently recommend, whether it's business or personal, in terms of that are hot topics for learning.
Well, since we're talking about both brands in my business, Tell Studios, we created a short course. I mean, people can find us on LinkedIn. That's where we're trying to create the most content for that brand. We created a short course on the importance and the value of storytelling in your marketing, and that is found if you go to not Studio Sherpas. If you go to tellstudios.com/course, and you can sign up. It's a free video series that we created, and I think it's great. I think I think it was a fun thing to tackle, where our heart is story. We just believe so much in connecting in an authentic way with people, and the best way we think to do that is through story and storytelling, and trying to figure out how to do that in your own marketing. A lot of people just don't have time to do that, right? They're doing their thing.
They're busy. They're making a business run.
Yep. So that's probably it. I mean, LinkedIn, those places. I mean, your podcast, obviously a great resource for people.
Oh, thanks, Ryan. No, sounds good. Well, I'll have that in the show notes. And, thanks so much, Ryan, for being on the podcast. I know I've really enjoyed just hearing, what that process has been like for you of being, a producer, a creator, but at the same time going into coaching, and what it's like that, the mixture between those two, how they complement each other, how you manage to stay relevant, stay producing content so you know what's going on, and at the same time be able to help people in an ever-changing digital landscape. As things are from month to month, year to year, things are always changing, and you have to stay up to date. And so thanks for all the value you've brought, and I'm sure our listeners will get a lot out of this conversation as well. So thanks for being on the show.
Awesome, Wes. Thanks so much, man. And I know what goes into doing stuff like this, so I appreciate that you're doing it. I love your mission behind it. Wishing you the best. Hundreds of episodes beyond this one, but appreciate your work, appreciate your heart, and good luck to all the things that you're doing.
No, thanks so much. To that was one of my goals when I started. Was like, I didn't have it all together when I started, but I was like, I'm just gonna start, keep iterating, keep producing. I was like, if I did 1,000 episodes, like I probably would be really good at something by the end of it. And so I don't know if I'll get to 1,000, but that was my mind. Is like, well, if I just keep doing it, like eventually I will be better at 1,000 than I did when I first started. So I think, it's that balance between sometimes you just have to get going, just try something, pick up, reiterate, and but I think making sure you're never stagnant and always creating, always producing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So thanks so much, Ryan. It's great having you on the show.
Wes. Appreciate it.
All right, bye.